So do classical commentaries of the Quran support the translation of the expanding universe? Let's have a look. So we have a scholar, Az-Zamakhshari, who died in the 11th century AD, and in commentating on the verse, he mentions a few things, and all these things are related to the meaning of musi'un. So in this case, the meanings that we get from the word musi'un is that it means the encompasser of the heavens, and that's physically, obviously, with power and strength encompassing it all, as well as having knowledge of it, obviously. And it means the provider as well, from the heavens, whether it's physical provision or spiritual provision. And also, it has a meaning of to be the expander. So all these meanings are alluded to in this verse. Okay, now before we go to Lisan al-Arab, which is the classical dictionary I want to draw attention to, I just wanted to just do a simple morphology lesson with you, just to show you the actual word musi'un and where it's actually derived from. In this translation, which I like this translation, it says, "We are its expander," which is quite a good translation, because this is actually an active participle. It's the one engaged in the act of awsa'a. So the actual verb is awsa'a, and then we get the active participle, the one engaged in this action, is actually musi'. Now here it's musi'un. Musi'un is a plural, and that's the plural of majesty. So we say, so actually look in the verse, we constructed with strength, and indeed we are its expander. So that's where we get musi'. So that's the verb, and that's the one engaged in this particular verb, the doer of the verb, and musi'. In actual Lisan al-Arab, the author, Ibn Manzur, he actually talks about the following verb. So that's the relation between awsa'a and musi'. So that's just a quick comment on that. It says, do classical dictionaries of the Arabic language support the translation that the word awsa'a means expanding? This is actually a scan, so I apologize for the quality of it. It's from the Lisan al-Arab, and the author died in the 13th century AD. And interestingly enough, he actually quotes in the actual meaning of the verb awsa'a, he actually mentions the actual verse in question and then comments on it. Now, I want to highlight this part, and especially here, it says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَ الْأَرْضِ سَاعَةً. Notice that's exactly the same quote of Zamakhshari. So this is one point to note, is that scholars, it's not about somebody coming and reading the Quran and then interpreting the Quran the way he thinks it is. No, it's not, it doesn't work this way. So there are many qualifications that somebody needs. And if you study tafsir, you'll notice that opinions are transmitted through an unbroken chain back to the companions of the Prophet, who obviously got it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we have the bottom sentence. It says, جعل أوسع بمعنى وسع. Now, وسع, there's no doubt it actually means to expand something. So, أوسع has multiple meanings, as we said. It means to provide for someone. It means to encompass something. It means to have power over it, to encompass it in knowledge. It could mean a number of things. It also could mean to expand. So I don't want to get into too technical details. It says that the form 2 verb, which is wasa'a, has the same meaning as the verb used in the verse, to expand something. But it doesn't say that the expanding is ongoing, or does it? Inshallah, we'll find out in part 2 of this series. Okay, so this is part 2 of the series, The Quran and the Expanding Universe. The verse in question is the following. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And the actual word in question is musi'un, and what it actually means. Now, a few things to note about the word musi'un is that it's a noun, that it's an active participle, and that it's a plural. Now, the plural aspect of it is just there to denote the majesty and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The plurality is not in question here. What is in question here is the fact that it's a noun. Now, the word in question is an active participle, as I mentioned, rather than a verb. So what is the difference between using a noun derived from the verb, such as an active participle, and the verb itself? To understand the difference, please watch this two-part series if you haven't already, and this will demonstrate the difference between the verb and the noun usages in the Quran. So I recommend you to watch those two parts if you haven't already done so. This will give one a better understanding of the word in question. So it is clear that the active participle indicates either a state or one who engages in action continually, meaning that he's doing this action over and over and over again. So that's what the active participle indicates, as opposed to the verb. As we showed you, the verb indicates just an action with a beginning and end that is defined within a specific period of time. Now, part of the miraculous nature of the Quran is that it uses a word or words that have more than one meaning, and all these meanings are intended. So in the case of this particular verse, the word musi'un has a number of meanings, and all these meanings have been mentioned by the classical scholars of Quranic commentary. If one looks at the classical commentaries, the following meanings are explained by these scholars. So musi'un means to encompass the heavens. How does Allah encompass it? Either encompassing it physically, meaning that He has power over it, through knowledge, that he knows everything that goes inside it, and obviously authority, that He has authority over it. Now, it's possible that Allah could have used a different word. For example, He could have used the word, instead of saying وَإِنَّا لَمُسِعُونَ, this part here, He could have used إِنَّا لَقَادِرُونَ, that we have complete power over it. But when He said musi'un, He meant all these meanings. So as we said, the first meaning means to compass. The second meaning means to provide for His creation. So musi' is one that provides for His creation. Where is provision from? It's from the heavens. Either physically, for example by the rain that He sends down, which brings life to everything on the earth. Without the rain, there will be no life. Or it could be spiritual provision. And we know that everything that one has as a provision is actually written and is decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is being written down in al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, in the preserved tablet. And the third meaning, and this is also, I mentioned this in part 1, it means to expand something or to make something vaster. So it's talking about physical expansion of the heavens. So all these meanings are in the classical commentaries and the classical dictionaries. Now there's one point, as I mentioned in the last video, is that how do we know that this is taking place constantly? Because we have expansion is an ongoing process. You'll notice that all these actions, the meanings that we talked about, are represented by a noun, musi'un, and it's not a verb. So these acts of encompassing, of providing sustenance, of expanding, are not confined to a particular time. So a noun, as opposed to the verb, indicates 1, a perpetual state, or 2, one who engages in action continually. It's very clear in the language of the Quran that the expanding universe is mentioned specifically. It's one of the meanings in the word musi'un. Now the fact that people didn't know that the universe was expanding is actually proof that the Quran is the word of God. Scientists prior to last century didn't know that the world was expanding. Now this is the same verse, but what I've highlighted here are 2 particles of emphasis. We have the inna and the la. Now if we go to the verse that comes after it, it says, وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ. And the earth we spread it out, and excellent is the preparer. There's no emphasis in this particular verse. This comes straight after it. So the first one's talking about the heavens, and there's emphasis there. A double emphasis. While on earth, there was no emphasis. So the question is, why? Is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to show you that this process of expansion is not a random process based on chance or an explosion that took place with no cause, but is due to His own divine will and power? And the fact that He's mentioned it and emphasized it in the Quran, this should really get you thinking. Is it not time that you accepted the truth and submit to Him, the one who has power and knowledge over all things? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I've actually received a question about the 3-part series I had on the expansion of the universe. And it was a Muslim brother who asked me an important question, and I thought that I should answer him. And what he writes is, he says, Assalamu alaikum brothers. I was working on a project about the Quran and the expansion of the heavens. I found the series from this institute and found it helpful. But brother, I'm looking for one more professional piece of advice before my thesis is close to completion. Someone said that musi' is the active participle of the stem for. For those who know, it's a form for verb, as he's rightfully pointed out. And it says, and to derive its tense, we must see the context. And in this ayah, the verb is in the past tense. So if you look at it, it says وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا, and the heavens, we constructed it. Banayna is a past tense verb. And what he's saying is that this atf, or this conjunction, that is joining the second part, should also be referred to in the past tense, or to make the tense of musi' more clear and accurate. So he wants me to explain musi'un and its actual tense. And as he said, this noun is derived from the form for verb, which is awsa'a. So in the past tense, it would be awsa'a, and then yusi'u would be the present tense, and then musi'un would be the active participle. One doing this action is called a musi'. And then we have una, which is the plural, and that's the plural of majesty that is used in the verse. Now this is going to require a bit of morphology, so for those who I'll try to be as clear as possible for those who might not know this, and then we'll explain some things inshallah. So in front of us we have the verb awsa'a, the past tense. Awsa'a, one of its meanings, means to expand something or to make something vaster. And as I showed you in the video series, it has a few other meanings, such as to encompass something, also to provide the means of livelihood. Awsa'a means he expanded. Yusi'u means he is expanding, so the present tense. And then musi' is the one who is doing this action. So musi' is actually a noun derived from these verbs and denotes one who does this action. I'll give you an example of this. We have, for example, the following verbs. So we have allama, which means he taught. This is the past tense. Then we have the present tense, yu'allimu, he is teaching. Then we have the active participle, as most people who are studying Arabic would know, means a teacher, mu'allim. Now, to be a teacher, you don't just teach once, meaning if you carry out this action once or twice, you don't become a mu'allim, do you? No, you don't. It requires years of studying, years of getting the knowledge, years of teaching, until you become a student teacher, and then you slowly progress to becoming a teacher. So this actually takes quite some time to get there. Now, if I asked you, what's the tense of the active participle? There is no tense. It denotes a state. Similarly, musi', which is the active participle, denotes a state. So somebody who engages in expanding, somebody who engages in encompassing, somebody who engages in providing for the creation. Allah used the ism, the active participle, to note the quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, one other point I want to mention, and this is quite important, is we have another verb that this could have been derived from, which is wassa'a. With the shadda, wassa'a, yuwassi'u and muwassi'. So it could have been, instead of inna lamusi'un, inna lamuwassi'un. And they're both transitive. However, there is a slight difference. Is that this form, which is the same form as allama, so you notice there's the shadda, they're actually a form 2, which is actually a more intensive form than the form 4. Form 2 denotes something happening with a lot of emphasis, a lot of what's known as mubalagha, and it actually denotes effort. Musi', and we have the other active participle, the form 2, which is it's muwassi'un. So muwassi' is somebody who is, it's a more of an intense action and requires more effort. So by using musi'un, it denotes the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you notice the verse, it's talking about the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's emphasis there. So musi'un denotes how easy it is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to carry out this, while muwassi'un would have indicated more difficulty. The actual, even the form of the verb chosen was to perfection. Just a concluding remark, and the point is, although the Quran mentions scientific phenomena that we've only recently discovered today, however, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this fact is actually quite remarkable as well. Because the Quran doesn't say that the heavens are expanding. It mentions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning, using the plural of majesty in the first person, plural, that it is we who are its expander, as if to say, this is something that you will discover, and when you discover it, know for sure that it is we, in the plural of majesty, it is we who are doing this.
So that's just the final point there I want to mention. وصلى الله سيد محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.